Dehydrating is a great way to preserve your herbs and you can use them all winter long. That's exactly what I'm gonna do with my huge basil plant here today. Welcome to the Salted Pepper, where we cook for real life using real food and we keep it real simple. And today I'm gonna dehydrate some basil. So we have a little garden and we tried raised garden beds this year and nothing grew except for my basil, which grew so huge. I couldn't believe it. So I harvested it by pulling it up by the roots and keeping it in this jar until I could find some time to process it. And I'm kind of out of time, and I would ordinarily make some pesto because that's so delicious, but really the leaves are starting to drop. I need to get this processed before it starts to go, bad. So I'm gonna dehydrate it. And I'm gonna use the Ninja Foodi XL oven to do that because it's so much basil. But the same technique would apply no matter what dehydrator you're using. Even if you're using the Ninja Foodi pressure cooker and air crisper with the dehydration function, it is exactly the same technique, same timing, same everything. So no worries there. This works across the board with dehydration. All right, so the first thing I do is not tip it over. I mean, it is heavy, like really heavy. So first thing I'm gonna do is start breaking off these leaves, okay? So that I don't tip this everywhere. And you see them all falling. That means I'm running out of time here. So I just clip the leaves, or the stems, I mean, like this. And I'm gonna give them a rinse, and I'll pull off any of the leaves that don't look good. So if something's brown like this, I'm not gonna worry about dehydrating it. So I'm gonna keep doing that. If there's, all this is just beautiful, but then there's some down here that just don't look so good. So I'll pull those off. Leave your basil or any herb on the stem when you're gonna dehydrate it. It's gonna make it super easy for you. So once I get done with all these, then what I'll do is give everything a nice rinse, get it cleaned off, just sort of blot it dry, and then we'll get to dehydrating it. All right, so let me get this rinsed off and get some of these leaves that are drying up out of here. Now, after I plucked all this, there is no way I'm gonna be able to dehydrate all this at one time. So what I'm gonna do is take about half of it and I will make some pesto and hopefully get a recipe out for you guys soon. And then the rest of it I will put in the dehydrator. All right, so once you rinse off your basil, and you can do this with any herb, so it's really fine. Whatever you are growing, just do the same thing that I'm doing here. Even the same temperatures will work, and the timing could be different, but for the most part, you want to dehydrate your herbs somewhere around 125 to 130. I like 125 for basil the best, but 130 does work. I have done it at that temperature too. Then I just kind of lay it here and I just blot it. I don't worry about getting it totally dry because guess what? We're dehydrating, it's going to get dry. So no worries there. So it doesn't have to be perfectly dry. But if it's sopping wet, it's just gonna take longer to dehydrate, right? That makes sense. Okay, so if you have some leaves that are falling off but look good, well, that one doesn't look too good, does it? Yeah, well, that one looks fine. Lay them down here right now on the bottom, okay? And then start just putting your stalks of your stems, I guess it would be more accurate, right here. And if there's any loose leaves like this, I will put that on the next tray. Okay, so just like that. And then put the next rack. Now this is the dehydration rack that is sold for this oven and I love it, okay? Absolutely love it. And then that is one layer. Now I don't put another layer on top because you need the airflow to go through, okay? So I just do it like that and then put this down here at the bottom, get that right in there and slide it in. And then we'll do the same thing for this one. Any loose down here. Now, a couple reasons why I keep them on the stems. Number one, it weights them down. So if you did not have this kind of a rack and it was open, you have less of a chance of the leaves kind of blowing all over your dehydrator. And the other thing is that it just makes it easier, in my opinion, to keep the leaves kind of separated because they're naturally separated here, and as they start to dehydrate, there will be more and more airflow through them. So I just choose to do it this way. You can obviously take them off the stems if you prefer, but it's pretty labor intensive, and I don't bother with it. Perfect. Now we're gonna set this back on top here. That's just gonna keep anything, if it does get light enough, it doesn't fly away, fly all over the dehydrator. All right, so now I'm gonna put this one on the level 3, push that in, close the oven door, turn it on. The function we want is dehydrate, and the temperature that I like for basil is 125, so I'm gonna go there. The time that I set is 6 hours. Now, this is the first time I'm doing this much basil, so I'm gonna go all the way to 8 hours because I have so much of it. And you know, it's not gonna make a difference. When it's dry, it's dry. It's not gonna dry more, so it makes no difference. You could set this for 24 hours and it would be fine. It's not gonna hurt the basil or anything. But what I found is about 6 hours is when the basil is completely dry. But I've got a lot in there today, so I'm gonna go with 8, and I'll check it in 6 and see how it looks, okay? We are all done dehydrating our basil. Now, I checked on it at 6 hours and it was not nearly done. So I went 8 hours, checked on it again, and it still wasn't quite done. So I dehydrated this basil for a total of 10 hours and then it was perfectly done. Those are the things that are going to change based on volume of basil, because I had quite a bit of basil on each rack, more than I've had in previous tests that I did for dehydrating basil, because I've done this in the oven and I've also done this in the Ninja Foodie using the dehydration rack. So that was the difference. Those are things that are going to change based on the amounts. So if you just have a little bit of basil, you might be done in 4 hours. So definitely set your time for about 8 hours. You can forget about it because it's not going to hurt it if it goes longer than that, or you can check on it in 4, 6, and then of course 8, and if you need to go a little bit longer, then go a little bit longer. No worries at all. All right, so let's take a look. I've already peeked at it obviously because I needed to determine if it was done, but let's go ahead and pull out the racks now. I'll just set them right here. All right, set that there, close the oven door. Now lift this off here, and yes, perfectly dehydrated basil. Oh my gosh. Oh, it smells amazing. All right, so then I just set that over there, and I get some sort of a clean, dry container. Whatever you want, a bowl is fine. And I just take the leaves, and I just kind of grind them up with my hands. This is the easiest way that I've found to do it. And if something doesn't come off easily, like I've got a few little leaves here that didn't come off, I don't worry about it. That means that they're not fully dehydrated, so I don't put them in my mix. Now, obviously, you could throw them back in if you wanted, but I don't worry about that usually. And then just mix it up. Kind of, you know, put it between your fingers and crush it up until it's the size that you want to have. And this looks really good. And then I just repeat that for all of these. If any little stems get in there, I just pick them out. Sometimes they'll drop in there. All right, that looks good. And now you can jar it up. What I'm using is a little spice jar here. I've already have some basil from a previous batch. And I'm just gonna add it to this jar. A sealed baggie will work. Any type of sealed container will be just fine to keep your basil in. And it will stay good for a long time because it's completely dehydrated, but usually you should use spices within about 6 months for the best flavor. Although I've had some in my spice cabinet a lot longer than that. I still use them. All right, there we go. So that is how you dehydrate basil. Same process for any type of herb like oregano, parsley, even cilantro you can dehydrate. Sage you could dehydrate. You might have different timings on them, but the temperature range should be somewhere between 125 and 130 for almost all herbs that you want to dehydrate. So when you have an excess of herbs that you grew and you don't want them to go to waste, give dehydrating a try. It's a great way to preserve them.